So this time we should be successful. Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I apologize for that technical difficulty. We should have it sorted out by now. But we would like to welcome everybody to our live streaming of this reading recital. I wish to welcome all of you, and I welcome all of the participants, our panel. We have a panel of 6 authors, including myself, from Grenada. We're from different parishes in Grenada, including St. George's, St. Andrews, and we should have one more on the panel. He's running a little late, and that is from St. Mark's. So we have not had any book events in Grenada for the year. We had one book recital in October of last year, but we thought, hey, it's summertime. Summer is almost over, in fact. We should be able to put on a book event, even if it is not in person. Let me just tell you, we should or could have or should have been delivering this evening's event at the public library, even in the face of the current state of affairs with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. But with the respective protocols in place, we could have had a live in-person event, but that's not the case because we don't have a functioning public library. So this evening, we are going to entertain you. We're going to tickle your minds. We're going to bring up some issues that might be vexing, that might be at the front of your minds, including this library issue. All right. So let me tell you what the format is. We are going to, I'm not going to introduce the panel, but when we each start our session, our presentation, we are going to talk about ourselves and our works, our books, and then we're going to proceed with our readings. We have about 3 minutes within which we could introduce ourselves, then 5 minutes to do the reading. We're going to pause in the middle of the presentations. There should be 6 of us. If Bassanio gets here, then we're going to pause after the 3rd reading, and we're going to discuss things. And then we're going to continue after that for the 2nd half, and we're going to discuss things at the end as well. You could see that some of us, we have backgrounds that look like libraries because we want to keep your thoughts on the library issue as we move along. So our presenters today in this order will be Amy, Rita, Bassanio, Cassandra, and Camille. So we expect Bassanio to join us. If he doesn't, then we just move right along. All right. So presenters, are we ready? The first presenter is Amy, and then she will introduce the person who comes afterwards. She will give the baton to the next person, and so on. So let's welcome Amy, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Jones, and I am from Big Parish, St. Andrew. I am an author, published author. I'm also a poet and a performer. I consider myself to be a creativity enthusiast. I love all things creative. When I started writing, I must have been about 8, and it was at primary school, St. Andrew's Methodist School. And I spent a few times well enough at the library in St. Andrew in Grenville before it burnt. And I used to love reading then. I'm not gonna blame the library for me not loving to read much now, but it was a part of my growing up. And afternoons after school, I would go to the St. Andrew Library. I was a library member. I had my card. I remember giving it and reading books like Goosebumps and those children's tales. So I enjoyed reading. And as someone who's from the parish of St. Andrew, I must say that I do miss having the library in Grenville. I think about my nephew who loves reading, and I would have loved it if there was a place where he could go and read as well. So, just a little bit about me. I have three books. First book was published in 2014, Beyond Fables Poetry. And my second book, which is my first novel actually, Chains That Bind, is a Grenadian novel. I'm going to be reading a little bit from that. And my final book, which was published this year, it is the Odyssey. So I'm going to start with reading a little excerpt from Chains That Bind. It is a full Grenadian novel. And one of the things I usually do is ask persons what they first recognize when they see the cover, what comes to mind, right? I grew up hearing a lot of Caribbean tales, Grenadian stories from my mother. So this would have encouraged me to write my first novel. So I'm reading from the second chapter, The Encounter. Afternoon, children. JJ and Cherry turned around to see Mr. Joe heading to his house. He looked like he had just come from the garden. Mr. Joe had a routine. On Mondays, he would tend to his small garden at the front of his house, where he planted seasonings and flowers. On Tuesdays, he would go to the river to fish for crayfish and mullet. Wednesdays, he considered his washing day. Thursdays were his days to clean his house. And on Fridays, Mr. Joe stayed at home and put his feet up. JJ and Cherry would always see him swinging in his hammock when they came from school. On Saturdays, Mr. Joe went to church in the Adventist congregation not too far from JJ's old school. And on Sundays, Mr. Joe would go to the land to pick cocoa and nutmeg. Mr. Joe was an unorthodox Adventist. He said that pork might have been the sweetest meat God had placed on the earth, and that God wouldn't punish him if he did not rest on Sunday. When asked about it, Mr. Joe would say, whether it's Sunday, Saturday, rest day, best day, I go rest when I feel like it. Papa God won't kill me. Mr. Joe must have been about 70 years old. No one could ever quite tell because whenever people asked, he would say that he did not remember. He once said to Petra, I live my life already. I count years in my life. I closer to the grave than the cradle. And I ain't had no time for that again. Afternoon, old man Joe, JJ and Cherry said to him. Mr. Joe stopped to look at them and turned around. Children, what do all you? All you come out to church and all you looking so? We good, Mr. Joe, Petra responded with a look of annoyance on her face. Petra was a force to be reckoned with. She was a private young woman who believed that her business was hers. She quite often said that unless she invited someone to be a part of it, that person had no right to know what was going on in her life. It was one of the reasons Cherry and Petra could never get along well. One minute they would be fine and they would be given sisterly advice, and the next minute they were distant strangers. But it was undisputed that Petra loved Cherry despite their differences. I watch all you grow up and all you lying for me. They looked up to see Mr. Joe walking up the stairs towards them. Children, what do all you? Where are your mother? Cherry swallowed the saliva that was growing at the back of her throat. She had never once lied to Mr. Joe, even at times when they had gone in his yard and stolen mangoes. We father come back, JJ said as he broke the awkward silence brewing between them. James, he come back? Okay, Mr. Joe responded. But how all you sit down there on the step like somebody dead? All you wasn't longing to see him? Petra sat there in silence. Cherry too wanted to say something, but she was afraid that Petra would beat her up. Yet, Cherry felt the heaviness on her chest, and she said she was overflowing with thoughts, questions, and thoughts that she deserved answers, feelings she couldn't name. Cherry wanted to talk to someone, even if that someone was not her father. Among the three of them, JJ did not quite understand the implications of his father's return. The children sat on the step, sorting out their feelings of anger, confusion, happiness, and disappointment. And they needed answers and they needed to talk to someone who would understand. But Cherry continued, afraid that Petra would snatch her by her picky hair and drag her across inside the house and put some licks on her. But it's not the same old man Joe. Mr. Joe sat a few steps lower to the children, looked up at them. He shook his head, gazed off into the bushes that grew on the side of his house, and searched for his thoughts. No one said a thing. All that could be heard was the wind brushing against the trees, the gliding sound of the water in the ravine a few meters away, the birds chattering, and Sammy's dog Polo as he barked away. "I know how you feel," Mr. Joe responded. "Oh man Joe, what do you mean you know how she feel?" Petra snapped. "Your father lived you for years and he never looked back? Eh? You don't know nothing. You don't know nothing, Mr. Joe. Oh, Petra, what are you? You gonna talk to a big old man like Mr. Joe, so?" JJ said as he turned sharply to look at Petra. "You rude we?" They were all confused and angry about the situation, but poor Mr. Joe. What did he do to deserve such a thing? "I will tell mommy about you," JJ shouted. "Leave her," Mr. Joe quietly responded. "She hurting. Give her time to grieve." Mr. Joe paused again, then said, "And yes, pretty girl, I know how it feels because it happened to me too." So this is an excerpt from chapter 2, The Encounter. The story is basically about a Grenadian family and some of the experiences that they would have had. It tells a lot about our Caribbean folklore and the tales that we've heard about La Jablesse, Mama Malady. So if you want to know much more about our culture, it's definitely a book for you to read. So I'm going to read one poem from my first published book, Beyond Fables Poetry. It's called Secrecy Hurts. I can't say we fell in love. It grew within us. Like the way you feel when you hear your favorite song play on a day when you've been down and it does wonders for you, making you feel like all lost dreams will magically come true. I can't say we fell in love. It was the permanent effect of a temporary sip of lust, running through my bloodstream, seeping through my pores, binding us to this sin we created, wishing one day the intensity would somehow be abated. I can't say we fell in love. It's safe to say a force grew within us, burning through my reality, thus making it so easy to temporarily forget the man I was to marry. So yes, it's kind of hard to explain the situation that drove me insane, that magnetic force that had me drawn to him. Each time wanting to leave, but feeling that obligation within to stick around and continue this sin, causing me to lose my mind each time they were together. I can't say we fell in love, but I found myself in love with a man who was in love with me, with a woman in love with him, while the one at home who loved me with every breath he took believed my lies, that I was out with friends while I was trembling at familiar hands rushing my thighs, wrestling in sheets with his best friend, best man to be, who suddenly became a part of me. I can't say we fell in love. Lust drove me to this. I've heard about those effects, but I guess ignorance really is bliss. This secret I plan to take to the grave with me like a bomb blew up in my face. And that which was hidden suddenly resurfaced, exposing secrets that should have never been shared and hidden desires that had no right to be aired. So as you read this, here's some advice as my relationship falls apart. Never let your significant other's best friend become a secret from the start, right? So my recently published book, A to Z Odyssey, is a collection of poems. And though it is a poetry book, it's still a story. So when you hear A to Z, it goes into that format. There's a poem for each letter of the alphabet. And while it might be simply constructed like a child's ABC, the book highlights how the seriousness of abuse, family structures, cultural beliefs, and other variations would ultimately affect relationships that we get into. So it's psychologically painful, it is thrilling, it is humorous, but most importantly, it is real. and it's available on Amazon. Copies would soon be in Grenada, so if persons are interested in buying, then it would be available. So my final piece that I'm going to read is first letter of the alphabet A, and the poem is called After Today. After a while, you stop caring about the ones who claim to do this in love. You stop listening to the voice that screams your name as the belt dangles from above your head, as you are trapped under the frame of a man with your neck perfectly fitted in his vice grip of a hand. You stop letting rough feet glide across your face. You stop letting them break your ribs and move them out of place as you are silenced by a fear to lose your life if you scream, but it's just another one of his schemes to trap you into believing that you should stay and continue this routine another day. You stop letting harsh words break you down into nothingness and that itching obligation to stay because it's for the best. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this abuse ends today. So thank you. That was a little bit from me. And if you are interested in getting copies, just link me on any one of my social media platforms and they will be available to you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Rita Joseph Olivetti from Grenada. I'm a retired judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. But now, instead of writing judgments, I am trying to write novels. I have always loved books. And one of my fondest memories is receiving books from the public library in St. George's. I lived in Grenville, so I never had the opportunity to go to that library. But every 2 weeks, the librarian posted books to us. And it was with great delight I look forward to receiving my book, brown paper parcel like this, wrapped up in string. When I look around me and I see the state of our libraries, it is with a great sadness and to think what our children have been deprived of and are being deprived of. It has been said that a house without books is like a house without windows. And I add, a country without public libraries is the country of the blind. So I implore our government, our people, to recognize the need for public libraries and to do our best to try to restore and rebuild what we have. Thank you. In relation to my writing, I have self-published one novel. It's called The Red Door. And it's written under my pen name, Rita Leon. It's essentially a story set in the late 60s, and it tells the tale of a young woman, impoverished, living in St. Andrews, who wants to get on. As I put it, she wants a place in the sun. She faces many challenges, both social, cultural, you name it, she faces them. In the end, she makes certain choices. And in this book, she tells you her own story from behind prison bars in a woman's prison in Tortola. I will read an excerpt from it in a minute, but I just want to say that I'm just about completed writing a second novel. I'm in the process of polishing it up and doing all the hard work that comes after writing the first draft. This is completely different from The Red Door. When I was a convent in Grenville, I was introduced to the works of Charles Dickens. We all know Charles Dickens. And I will always remember The Tale of Two Cities. This was the book they introduced us to. And I still hear the sound of the tumbrils, and I could still see Madame Defarge with her knitting needles, knitting the names of the people who will be condemned to die on the guillotine. So this love story with Charles Dickens has continued all my life, and I've been fascinated by his works. The second novel I'm talking about, I fondly call it Daisy, and it's been inspired by Dickens' David Copperfield. And for those of us who are familiar and will one day open David Copperfield, we remember there is a sub-story of lovers, Emily and Steerforth. And I've always been intrigued by them because they leave the pages of David Copperfield and go away for many years. And Dickens never tells us what happened to them. They come back at the end of the story. And my book is a reimagining of the adventures, and I've taken them from London to the continent and to a slave plantation in the Caribbean. Dickens went to America, and no doubt he might smile if she should ever hear of his characters wandering on a slave plantation in the Caribbean. I hope one day, perhaps next year, that we might be able to have this on the shelves. I thank you for that. In terms of my book, it's now available, that is the Red Door, it's now available as an ebook on Amazon Kindle. You can get it at paper-based Normandy Hotel in Trinidad, that's Port of Spain, Trinidad. Art and Soul in Grenada, you can get it from myself, of course. Dr. Joseph's office in Grenville, Mrs. Ali's store in Grenville, Belmont Estate, and Alex M. Marketing at Old Fort St. George's. And now I will turn to an excerpt from the Red Door. I read from chapter 10, it's called Of Letters and Lies. He met me at the Piarco airport with a look of studied approval and a bear hug. God, you look good enough to eat, he whispered in my ear. I was delighted, but tried not to show it, all in a day's work, you know. He had a rental car, but much to my relief, instead of driving straight to the hotel, he suggested that he show me the sights as it was my first time in Trinidad. Joel stopped first in the heart of Port of Spain, and hand in hand we strolled along the esplanade, looking at the streets jam-packed with traffic, vendors, and pedestrians. We walked along Frederick Street with me marveling at the brightly lit shop windows, aglow with rich-colored fabrics and wares of every variety, although I was not prepared for the noise, the screech of brakes, vendors seeking customers which assailed my ears. Joel pointed out the post office tower to me and the busy docks. Finally, we returned to the car, almost overcome by the heat and the glare. Joel then cruised around the expansive Queen's Park Savannah and pointed out the lofty old buildings that lined the route to the hotel. Thank you. Thank you.
Basanya was supposed to go at this point, but he's not here yet. So Cassandra is up.
So, welcome everyone, welcome. My name is Cassandra Smith. I am the author of The Rebellion of Mary Magdalene, a cappella, and I'm also the author of a children's book, Kiara's Kite. I'm from the parish of St. George. Books have always been my great escape. I think the previous authors spoke about the importance of having a library, but I want to talk about my experience, the experiences I had while going to the library. For one, something as simple as making friends, just like I said previously, escaping through books, traveling through books, traveling through time, as well as research, the availability of a world of information. So I want to stress on that. And I think that every generation should have access to that. I will now read an excerpt from my book, The Rebellion of Mary Magdalene. So here goes. The Rebellion. I sat there watching the hypocrisy and sheer evil that plagued our society. The church was filled with people, but a murderer and a rapist was walking free. Everyone knew that Carl was innocent of the crime. All of them knew an innocent man was hanged for a crime he did not commit and could not have committed. However, everyone went along with the mendacity out of cowardice, out of fear of Magistrate Lewis. I wanted so badly to stand up and call them out, to tell them that by sitting in silence, they were all guilty of the crime. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip away the lies that covered their faces, but I remained calm, stifling my emotions, my candor for the sake of Celeste. Celeste, my friend, my sister, my comrade in arms, who was now lying in a coffin in front of me. Celeste, who once threw a dead frog on her mother and laughed her heart out when her mother started jumping and screaming. Celeste, who had eaten all her mother's plum stew from the jar and replaced the missing plums with small stones. Celeste, the girl who loved helping others. Celeste, who used to strip naked and jump into the river shouting, "What you have, I have too." Celeste, who used to follow me around because she saw me as a big sister. My Celeste, I had loved her with every inch of my soul. She was buried on a Friday, and our school was given a whole day off to attend the funeral and to mourn. On the Sunday, my gang and I met up as we always did after Sunday school. Our gang was named after our heroine, Mary Magdalene. We had all taken an oath to protect each other. Celeste was the youngest member of our gang, and she was going to be avenged. On Monday morning, our form mistress entered our form to take the attendance, but this time, no one stood up to extend the customary greeting that was expected from us. Utter surprise and anger ran across her face, but she remained quiet. She then started calling out our names one by one as an indication that we should stand and greet her, but no one complied. We all sat there glaring at her, waiting for her to make the next move. We so much anticipated. She then rushed out and came back with 3 teachers and the principal. Miss Jacob looked directly at me and said, "Stop this, because it will not end well for you today." Her name was Celeste Barry, and you and I both know that her rapist and murderer still walks the streets. I responded defiantly. She then walked up to me and grabbed me by the hand as if to forcefully drag me out of the classroom. I spun her around and she fell to the door, and that was when it started. Teachers versus students, young women against a system that offered them no protection. They fought us hard and we fought back harder, using anything our hands found to vent out our anger. We pulled hair as weeds from the garden. We bit like rabid dogs. We threw tables and chairs like grenades. We tore at the plaques on the wall. We kicked, we screamed. Then we took to the street, chanting at the top of our lungs, "Justice for Celeste, justice for Celeste." Here we were shouting at the top of our voices on the very streets we once walked in silence, too afraid to be deemed as bad girls. I was at the front of the line. We were one screaming in unison, bloodied, torn school shirts, disheveled hairs, broken lips, swollen eyes, but still we found the strength to shout, "Justice for Celeste." When we got to the courtroom, we shouted even louder, "Justice for Celeste, Mary Magdalene, justice for Celeste, Mary Magdalene," we screamed. We threw stone after stone at the building until we could throw no more. We broke windows, we hammered at the door to let us in, but the plank of solid mahogany remained firm. We would have certainly burned it to the ground if given the chance. Then they came. In their hands they held batons, but we did not fear the batons. How many times had we seen far worse? Lack of voice, lack of choice, no freedom to be, to live. Our very lives dictated, our voices choked until it became no more. Our souls joined in unison as we laughed at their batons, laughed because we had seen far worse. There we were, hands locked together. We did not care about skin color or hair texture or social status, for we had burnt it all of society's walls and barriers. We were one soul screaming to be free from oppression and hypocrisy. We screamed for all the women that went before us. We screamed and brought forth Shango priestesses and old Obia women from their graves. We screamed and brought forth the spirits of the women who died on the Middle Passage. those who died in bondage, those who died fighting to be free. We screamed for all the souls denied a body, denied a chance to suckle on their mother's breast, because society would judge and chastise them like their mothers. We screamed and brought forth the souls of the Kalinago women who were raped, murdered, and buried in unmarked graves. We screamed for the blistered hands of the women who toiled on the nutmeg and cocoa plantation and were still given less, their hands knotted, tired, and old with stony corns and blisters. We screamed at the irony of it all, that we, the givers of life, would be barred from life. What did we care about their batons? We laughed at their batons, laughed because we had seen far worse. On that day, all 31 of us were taken into police custody, but even the iron bars could not confine us as we continued our protest, justice for Celeste, justice for Celeste, Mary Magdalene, we wailed. We were let off with a strict warning. Maybe it was because some of the girls had affluent parents. Maybe it was because hypocrisy was trembling and was afraid once on the island of Grenada. So this is an excerpt from The Rebellion of Mary Magdalene. It can be found on Amazon as well as a cappella. I want to read a poem from my upcoming book. My book is entitled Ellipse. It will soon be available on Amazon as well. The poem is entitled The Divine. The Divine, beyond religion. I found you not in the walls of Jerusalem, neither in the walls of the Vatican, neither in the pages of any holy books. I found you in the stars that twinkle despite. I found you in the hands of the beggar as he hopes. I found you in the early morning of zikr beads and patience. I found you in the cactus that blossom in the desert, in the dry desert, in the flowers and the bees that respect coexistence. In the Taj Mahal, I found you in the eyes of the lovers. In the spring and volcanoes by the life that endures. I found your presence, your inspiration everywhere. I need not man to tell me you exist because my soul already feels it. And in the noisy calm of the night, she whispers, I know the path to the divine. So thank you, everyone. I will now pass you on to the Camille John. So thank you.
Good night, everyone. My name is Camille John, and I am the author of a book called Between the Rhymes. It was recently published, and it's available on Amazon in ebook and in the paperback version. They're also available from me in Grenada. So if anyone needs any, you can let me know. Talking about libraries, to be very honest, I've never really read in the library in St. George's because I was a voracious reader. My mother introduced me to books at the age of 3. So by the time I was about 8, 9, and I went into the library, I had read everything they had on offer for children, but I was too young to go upstairs to the adult section. So what my mother did, and I'm grateful for her, she spent a lot of money. She would buy me 2 books every afternoon from Bridal and Minors in St. George's, the illustrated classics, and she would bring them home for me. And by 7 o'clock, I would read the 2 of them. And, it couldn't continue like that. So my mom found a system where she could kind of exchange the books because they were still in such good condition. So I got to read so much more. But I know the value of books, and I know the value of building the imagination of children from a young age, and even people who are older too, who may fall in love with books. And having a safe space to read or to do research or to write this book that we all been working on, it's a blessing. And it's one that we don't have right now because, well, the libraries are no longer there. I want to salute Grenada Schools Incorporated, who build libraries in the primary schools, all the public primary schools. I want to salute them because they have realized how important it is to have libraries, and so they are providing it for the young children. So Reading from Between the Rhymes, it's a book of poems that is more social and political commentary on issues that take place in Grenada, regionally and internationally. I'll read two poems from the quote unquote rum section, because rum is one of the things in Grenada that everybody seems to love. And we're noticing that younger and younger children are imbibing from, rum and so forth. And so I always was troubled by this. And so I have a couple poems in here about it. So I'll read two of them. The first is called How I Met My Murderer. We were introduced by heartache, the specific pain stabbing my chest over and over and over again. We were so different. I mean, I was a church girl, always at home or at school, a sinner trying best to be a saint. And we met in a bar, quaint, quiet, rustic. I essayed a smile. It was plastic, but accepted. The lights weren't so bright. My countenance was grim. I felt my happiness dim. The specific pain stabbing my chest over and over and over again. I'd seen him before, in here, well, everywhere. He wasn't stalking me, I think. And I wasn't stalking him at first, until he became my first. He quenched my thirst and ignited fires. It was a mistake the night we were introduced by heartache. He consumed me. He became my everything. He became my all. His name, alcohol. So this poem is a tale of somebody, and she fell in love with the rum. It's kind of weird seeing ladies drink and drink hard liquor, but we have so much of that. So I wanted to capture that in a poem. And this one is called Eights of Rum. Eights of rum. If we know, that's a measurement of a drink here. You go in a rum shop, you ask for eights, they go set you up. So this is called Eights of Rum. Yet another rum distillery in Grenada. Yet another alcohol producing plant. Seemingly good for the economy because Grenadians drink so much. Never mind that alcohol is classified as a drug. Traumatized? Well, you should be. You should be shaking in your brand new Clarks or your Vans or Jordans. The effects of alcohol are not imaginary. They're not a product of too much free time. They're not a figment of fiction. Alcohol is used by people here, sometimes just even for them to function. Just a little eights of rum to keep the head up, because they're fed up of the current situation of living. Have nothing to look forward to but the bushing for the country's purists. Steady work for the next 6 months. And what about after that? Ridiculous. So they knock back yet another eights of rum. Another rum distillery run on sugarcane, but alcohol runs through their veins on a day-to-day basis. They lounge on a rum oasis. The sides of the road have become a bathroom because there's no room in the shop to take a piss when they're pissed about the cost of books for school, must buy textbooks and workbooks, but no work is done because the children have found the eights of rum. Whether intelligent or dumb, rum never discriminates. It's all inclusive, like all parties. There's a possibility to be somebody when everyone has a glass. So they don't go down by the river, but will sit all day next to the rivers, having to appear in court because they had too much Clark's coat. Shirt always rumpled because they don't know jack about an iron, except Jack Iron. And they think that they're clever. Too intelligent for mere mortals, too bright for education, no need to know how much except oil and liquor. Turn into job quicker than Clark Kent could become Superman. But another rum distillery in Grenada, practically encouraging an impractical lifestyle. No worries, no stress, just dress and find the bottle. Stress reliever bar none, the eights of rum. Still a mystery. Yet another rum distillery, but no public library, no place to turn pages, but using their already garnished rages to imbibe, to sip and quaff. Such a gaffe by government, inviting future torment. And they wonder why problems are more often resolved through violence. Action without thought will bring unwanted outcomes, and all they think about is the Itza rum. Yet another rum distillery in Grenada, a location advertised for vacation, labeled pure, but sandy beaches lack sand, and farmers lack land, roads lack tar, but never a lack of bars. Teachers lack salaries, the hospital lacks beds, nurses lack pensions, but never a lack of tension. The GDP lacks increase, children lack a future, but we lean on tourism, and when we get them to come, all we offer is a Itza rum. And it makes sense that the rum wins gold. The rum is treasure that burns the chest. From barrels to bottles and bottles to glasses, the Itza rum is the only legacy in sight. But why is rum the only thing that Grenada does right? Thank you. I'll pass you on to Mr. David Ambrose.
Thank you. Everyone here again. So my name is David Ambrose. Again, welcome. And this time I am going to read a couple of excerpts. I am an educator by profession. I am a lecturer at the TA Marischal Community College. I have 3 books. I'm going to share with you from 2 this evening. My first book is called White Spice, and this is a crime thriller that I published in 2015. In fact, I'm working on a sequel right now. Maybe in 2021, we might see a sequel to White Spice. My second book is That Time in Bogles, a Carriacou Tale. And with this one, I take readers to our sister island of Carriacou. This is a cultural / historical fictional piece. And so we follow a little boy as he visits his relatives in Carriacou. And I also published a short story called Zone 1. And Zone 1, I published in December of 2019. And I take readers along with a police officer, a motor officer in Grand Anse on Christmas Eve. So you know how traffic could be on Christmas Eve. And those of you from Grenada, imagine traffic in Grand Anse. So I'm going to read right now from Zone 1. And all my books you could get on Amazon. Zone 1 and That Time in Bogles are available in paperback edition as well as in Kindle version. You could get White Spice only as paperback. In Grenada, you could get all 3 of those books from me. You might see White Spice in the museum. They should have some copies still, but all of them, you could just find me and make an order, and I'll find you eventually. So whenever I do book events, I always imagine reading to people in the library or a library. We don't have any book events, reading events in our library at the college, but my books are there so people could borrow them. But let me read an excerpt from Zone 1. And this excerpt starts or takes us to the Montrouge roundabout, where Corporal Lewis, who is the motor officer, is refreshing himself. It's been a long day, it's hot, just like today. Today was hot, but so now he's refreshing himself, observing the scene and all of that. Lewis sucked up the refreshing liquid directly from a coconut gourd while observing the traffic at Montrouge roundabout. Nearby, Wall Street bustled with pedestrians. The officer imagined how the scene looked from above. A truck's horn drowned out any other sound in the area. The corporal turned to see a 32-ton Mack lorry approaching the northbound bus stop, its path impeded by a bus that had stopped in the roadway and within the roundabout zone. The truck driver blasted his horn a couple more times. The bus conductor ignored the massive vehicle as he called potential passengers on Wall Street. Air brakes hissed. The truck driver cursed. Corporal Lewis observed the showdown as he savored his coconut water. Now, this should be interesting, he thought with a sneer. The loaded truck lurched forward a few times, but the bus refused to move. Screeching tires, hissing air, honking horns, shouts and screams flooded the space. Lewis almost dropped his coconut. He grinned. "Officer, you stand up there laughing?" A man said, "You want the truck to mash up the bus?" That truck doing what most drivers always want to do. The Mac had inched up to the bus and gently pushed it forward a few meters. Shocked passengers screamed at the bus driver to make way for the behemoth. The truck's air-splitting horns scared them even more. The bus driver finally pulled out of the roadway and the massive truck moved along. Lewis could swear that he heard the truck driver laughing. The bus driver ran across the road to him. "Officer, do you see what that truck do, my boss?" "Driver, you were blocking the road and trying to pick up people. If you had pulled out of the road and into the designated bus stop, that would not happen. I should actually be charging you. That's a fine of $1,500. The bus driver slinked back to his vehicle. So all kind of things happening on the Grandins Main Road, but not just with bus drivers, other drivers and pedestrians and so on. Let's get a bit more festive with That Time in Bogles, a Caribou tale. And this is where the protagonist Daniel experiences the stone feast for the first time, as a feast where families will celebrate the erection of a headstone on a tomb 2 years after the family member died. So this is a particularly festive occasion for this family, the Peters family in Bogles. I'll start after the soca and the reggae. I'll start playing, and then we get into local music and dance. So we're talking about the string band music and big drum dancing. A string band then took over the entertainment, and the merry atmosphere in the village went up a notch as two guitars, a banjo, and a violin called out to every home in Bogles and surrounding communities to dispatch its occupants to the Peters yard. Daniel and Elijah moved closer to the action. Elisha disappeared inside the house. "Ja, look, we cousin playing banjo." Daniel pointed out the tall man with the afro. Godwin on a high boy. With eyes closed, Godwin rotated his head swiftly in time with the fast breakaway rhythm that his band strummed. The wind had picked up now, and Masanto and ordinary lanterns around the yard cast eerie dancing shadows in the dusk. Everybody in the yard was transformed into a dancing machine. "That is the best banjo man in Caribou," Elijah stated. "Listen to that banjo talk now." Several minutes later, drums replaced the stringed instruments, and the crowd rearranged itself to form a circle facing inwards. Tantan, Concheril, and two other Bogles elders danced to the center of the ring with two bottles. "They're going on with the ground again," Daniel said confidently. "Kopai, you're getting to know the thing," Elijah said, grinning. The foursome poured rum and water alternately on the ground, uttering words that Daniel still couldn't understand. He deduced that they were again calling out to the ancestors and spirits. "Tanti and them come in and dance now," Elijah announced after the invocations. Tanti and three middle-aged women gamboled bare feet to the center of the yard to the slow beat of the drums. Daniel was surprised to see Elisha among the three drummers. His open palms struck the goatskin surface of his bass drum in perfect sync with the other bass drummer. Ruth and another girl shook shak-shaks energetically to the established rhythm. "Long sharp playing the bula drum, man," Elijah said to his cousin. "Sometimes I just play the cutter drum too." He pointed to the largest drum in the middle of the trio. Tanti looked even taller with her green and yellow head wrap. A multicolored winged skirt covered the bottom half of her dress. The floral pattern of the skirt reminded Daniel of the red, pink, and purple bougainvillea flowers around his house in Grenada. All four ladies wore matching costumes. Soon the intensity of the drumming increased. A few ladies standing behind the drummers clapped and chanted as the dancers stepped, skipped, and strutted for a few minutes in the ring. The choreographed dancing and rhythmic drumming hypnotized Daniel until he thought he was in a trance. One singer would throw out a line, then the others in the group would respond in a chorus. Their language was unfamiliar to Daniel. He made a mental note to ask his mother if kayaks speak other languages besides English. Then Tanti was left alone to do a solo act. She took up a spot in front of Elisha, who pounded his drum while focusing on his mother's feet. The bass seemed to reach out on its own to move them. "Whoa," Daniel exclaimed. "That's sick, boy." He nodded in approval, and his eyes bulged as they fixed on his aunt's feet, moving in perfect cadence to her son's drumming. Tanti flared her skirt as she skipped from right foot to left, revealing its shiny red inner fabric. At times, her upper body hung parallel to the ground before she would rock back upright to the boom of the bula. She shimmied and shook her hips and head in quick time to the drumming. A roar went up from the audience as her slim figure twirled 6 times while the drumming rose to a crescendo. She suddenly leapt into the air, then dropped to a crouched position in the center of the circle, her head bowed. The drums fell silent. The spectators erupted in cheers, applause, and whistles. "Kopai, this is the best big drum dancing I ever see," Daniel said, breathing heavily. He had never seen big drum dancing in his life. Thank you. So that's just an excerpt from that time in Bogles. And we go way back. The story is set in 1982. So we go back to a time when houses hardly had running water. Not a lot of people had electricity. Well, you can imagine no telephone and obviously no internet. So imagine life in those days, and people enjoyed life. Simple life, but enjoyable. So we did not have Bassanio tonight, but we heard from all 5 authors, and we see some people had questions. There's a question for Cassandra. Cassandra, someone asked, what inspired you to write Mary Magdalene?
Well, first of all, I have been asked about the title, and I always tell people that the story surrounding Mary Magdalene has always been a point of reflection. I feel as if there are stories to be told here, and it needed to be told, hence the reason why. So I hope I'm hitting the nail on the head. Like I honestly felt that there are a lot of Grenadian stories that needed to be told, and that's one of that was the whole point of the rebellion of Mary Magdalene.
Nice, thank you. Somebody asked me what inspired me to write Zone 1. And Zone 1, so Zone 1 takes place in Grandins, of course. And Grandins, every time you go to Grandins, you see a lot of traffic. There's so much traffic there. And people do crazy things. Sometimes we just say bus drivers drive crazily on the road, but not just bus drivers. So even this afternoon, I was coming from church, and a man along the Montrouge Road, he stopped across the road. His entire vehicle was across the road so he could stop to buy a bottle of coconut water. I'm wondering, come on, man, what is that? You know, so we had to hold up, wait for the man to complete the transaction, then he would go on his way. So all the years, I used to live in Grandins, so all the years of observing traffic along the Grandins main road, and in fact, the increase in traffic along the road, so many people go to work in Grandins. I see things happening, and I felt inspired that I should address some of the issues, you know. And so the story is actually written in the form of, suppose a lesson or a series of lessons, perhaps of how we should use the road and things like that. But from the perspective of a motor officer. So he has the freedom to ride up and down the road for the whole day and make observations and do what it takes to try to regulate the traffic. All right. So imagine if all of our books were available to students in libraries, public libraries that is. Just before the lockdown, I was able to put some books in the TAMCC library. So they purchased a few copies. But it's unfortunate that we don't have other libraries to house Grenadian books. And there are so many Grenadian authors, and any public library would be a good space in which anybody could find a book without necessarily having to buy a copy from a bookstore. Obviously, we want to sell copies, but people want access to books as well. Let me see what other people have said in the. Will this live be made public after? Yes, the live will be made public. The video will be made public afterwards. So you could just go back to the same YouTube channel and you could access the video to hear all of our readings. So like I said at the beginning, there should have been 6 of us, but one of us did not make it. Somebody says, Camille, you all are awesome. Camille, Grenada is the only place that Jack Sparrow can ask, but why is the rum gone? And so people are appreciative of the works that we do. So all of us have published something within the last 2 years, and I think we're all working on new material. Did I hear you say working on new material as well, Cassandra?
Yes, I am. So soon I should be able to, sorry, Ellipses and Pandora Girl should be available on Amazon. I would like to also mention that The Rebellion of Mary Magdalene can be found at the Standard Bookstore as well as Teachers Bookshop.
So Standard Bookstore and Teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I have some White Spice at Standard still, right? Huh. Yes, yes. I forgot about that. Yeah. All right. So, any other comments, authors? So Rita, Red Door is set partly in the Virgin Islands. Are copies of Red Door available in the Virgin Islands though?
Not, well, available in the sense that now it's on Kindle. So
All right.
someone can. We don't really have an outlet in the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
I've been working on that, but I do have friends who have purchased copies and are spreading the word.
Yeah.
And in terms of where the Red Door is set, we have the majority of the action, I would say, is split between Grenada and BVI, because the protagonist travels from Grenada to BVI. We're also taking a couple of visits for certain reasons to Trinidad, and she visits Puerto Rico and St. Thomas. So I treat it as a Caribbean story.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice, nice. I was going to ask, so the title is The Red Door. Did you come up with the title before the story or the story before the title?
It's interesting. It's funny. I came up with the door, the red door, long before the story. And the red door shown on the cover here actually represents the red door of the women's prison in Tortola, which still exists and is now a museum.
Okay.
So that is somewhere in the subconscious. I was walking along the street and I liked the look of the door and I just took a picture of it. And years afterwards, it seems to be the fitting, everything just fitting.
Yeah. That's nice. That happens so often when we write stories and some image that we've had in mind for a long time presents the perfect opportunity to be that cover, and it's so eye-catching.
Indeed.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about writing a novel, Amy? Another novel?
Yes, Mr. Ambrose, I have some stuff that I'm working on. One might be a little more advanced than the others. So I'm not sure when. Yeah, I usually do that, you know.
Okay.
When I have ideas, I have to pen them. So I may have several ideas at a time and I need to write them down, otherwise they go. So the one that I'm working on now should have been published when my last book was published. But there's so many different things happening that didn't happen. So I'm working on that.
Nice. Somebody has commented that we should do this again. So yeah, we'll do this every few weeks, and so you should look forward to hearing from, because there are so many Grenadian authors, so you should look forward to hearing from Grenadian authors as we present our works. Here's a general question for the panel. What Grenadian book do you enjoy other than your own? Not necessarily a favorite, but something that pops in your mind.
So I really want to answer that. I saw Camille was waving her hand, but um, top three books I would have to say is Unveiling Island Passions by Dr. Wendy Crawford. White Spice is one of my favorite books in terms of a novel that I've read. I'm not being biased to Mr. Ambrose. It really is a lovely book. And Helpless Cries by Michelle Alexander. So those are my top three Grenadian novels that I love.
Wow.
Well, my favorite Grenadian author is Amy Jones. It's not that she's my friend, but I just really like her writing. So my favorite Grenadian novel is Chains That Bind. I really love it. I think it's a really well-written piece that blends our culture with her beliefs, and you also get a lot of Grenadian twang in there, and you learn something because at the end of the book, there's a is that is it that index? What's the word?
Glossary.
Glossary, so you can learn the terms and stuff like that. So my favorite book from a Grenadian author is Chains That Bind.
You were saying, Rita? Oh,
Sorry, am I on?
Yeah.
My favorite book, one of my favorite books is Jacob Ross, Painter Bender. I see it as a love song to Grenada. He's a wonderful writer. I have to say, I enjoyed White Spice, although I am not a into crime and thrillers, but I enjoyed it, and specifically because you placed it in Grenada. You did not make up an imaginary island. We had actions on the streets of Grenada, and for that I'm thankful. You don't name our places, we don't exist. Thank you, David.
So I guess I'm up. So first of all, I must mention that I have a list of Grenadian books that books written by Grenadians that I need to read. So it's on a list and I'm going through them. But so far, I really enjoyed David's book, That Time in Bugles. I am a big fan of culture. I love the fact that it highlights a lot of the Caribou culture, and I think it's very concise. It's easy to read. I enjoyed that, and kudos, good, very good, David.
Thank you. I'm a history buff, so I like Roger Bayer's book, Tattooed Memories. It's autobiographical in that he was a medic in the Vietnam War. and he actually takes you as the medic with him in that war. And that's some really crazy things. And because I experienced the Grenada invasion in 1983, living in Grandance where all the action was, so in a sense, I got that feeling of what he was talking about, even though obviously he's the medic, or he was the medic, and he was in the middle of it from the soldier's point of view. But yeah, that was a book, or that's a book that I really like. Probably wouldn't read it too often though, because we're talking about the Vietnam War, but for the historical value and so on. Yeah, I really like that. But there are so many great Canadian books around, and somebody had made a point, ask if we are applying for the Kingston Creative Catapult Arts Grant. That's something we have to get it. We have to do some research on. We'll find out about that. And a question for Rita: was the main character based on a specific person?
Actually, the short answer to that is no, but it was based on an amalgam of young women who I encountered during my work. So she's a fictitious character, and I've taken parts from real experience to make Jessie, to create Jessica Cummings, the protagonist. Thank you.
Jessica went through so much in that story. Sometimes I felt so sorry for her. Somebody, how many published authors are there? I take it how many Canadian published authors are there? I think there are more authors than we
know.
know in terms of all over the world. But we did a count, or we tried to do a count last year, like around October, and we came up to the upper 70s of names that we know of. And there are Canadians all over the place who write that we just don't know. But they're around and they keep popping up. So Cassandra has to leave. Thank you, Cassandra, for joining us. And
Bye, everyone. Bye.
bye-bye. Nice. Oh, somebody said not many male authors. So if Bassanio was here, he could have represented well. But that's a pretty good point, in fact. I have to look at the list again to see how many male authors and how many female authors there are.
I think there are more male authors than we get, because there was one who published in October. His name slips my mind now.
As a
He
police
did
officer.
Oh goodness, the book. The name is going. It's on my cover. I don't remember the name. I can't remember the name of the author. I can't remember the name of the book. I'm too young for this, but I think there are a couple of male authors. We just haven't seen them around just yet. Yeah.
Like you, I can't remember his name, but I think there was a police officer in
That's my uncle.
That's your uncle?
From Riverside?
From St. Patrick, yeah.
Yeah, that's my uncle, Loxley John. Recently
that's
published.
That's the name. Okay.
That's my uncle. Hey, shout out to my uncle.
Yeah. That's the connection.
That's my dad's brother. Shout out to my uncle.
Nice.
Yeah, he recently published.
I haven't met him yet, but yeah, yes. That's why his name was coming up. And there are a few other guys who male authors in the place. You might think of the Roger Byers and the Ron and Twines and so on, but there are others.
Sorry, Dunbar Campbell comes to mind.
Dunbar, yes.
Yeah,
I went to Dunbar's book launch, his last book launch, the Fedon story again. So it comes to mind. He's based in the United States, of course. Yeah. At TMCC, we might get some young authors coming out of the college. A lot of male authors, that is, both male and female, but a lot of young men have gotten into poetry. And so we might see, try to encourage them to publish. So in a few years, we might see some.
But the thing is, it's a bit easier maybe to say that because there's self-publishing and it's so mainstream and you could get in touch with like people who have published to show you the ropes. I think now you're getting more people publishing, because prior to that you had to go through maybe a publishing house and it was a lot of work. But now that you could do it your own, you might get more people publishing.
Yeah. And I'm sure after you publish, people have probably come up to you and say, hey, I have some things to, you know.
Yes, one of my friends, he was here. He's Guyanese, but he was based in Grenada for a while. He published as well last year, early this year. Terrence Isaacs, he has a book out, and so I think it's gonna be good for authors to be able to publish their work.
Yeah. Somebody asked, can any of the books be used in secondary schools for English B? What do y'all think?
I think mine can. The poetry book, this one, it's not for children. So secondary schools, yes, I think that it can be used for, because I think there should be more Grenadian works in the Grenadian schools, even if it's lower school, because you streamline for CXC. But I also think that the CXC poetry book needs an overhaul to include the younger writers. You could keep the same themes, but you know, different perspectives. Everything evolves, and I think the work that we study should evolve along with it.
Yeah, I agree with Amy. Chains that bind, I could see that being studied in secondary schools.
I'm hoping that somebody from the ministry is probably looking, Ministry of Education, and would like to do that, because my sister, when she was teaching an English B class sometime last year, they read a portion of this book, and a lot of the children would have, not just from convent, but I'm talking about younger secondary school students, read the book and expressed their interest. So I'm hoping in time, as Camille says, whoever needs to come together to deal with literature in schools should think about books that our students will be able to relate to. When you pick up a book and you can read Grenadian, as was the term Camille uses? Grenadian English?
Grenadian Standard English, yes.
Yes, when you pick up a book and you can relate to Grenadian Standard English, it's something that's worth talking about.
Yeah, I was it last year or maybe a couple 2 years ago. I had posted a picture of 3 books and I said, hey, these 3 books could be used in secondary schools in the English B curriculum. Chains That Bind, Mary Magdalene, The Rebellion of Mary Magdalene, and That Time in Bogles. I mean, they all deal with Grenadian issues at different eras of our history, but I could see any of those books being used. So maybe somebody from ministry is checking us out and we'll consider. But sometimes it takes so long to review these books. I don't know what they've written on. Have you considered any book, Rita, that could be used in secondary schools? Any that you've read, Grenadian books that you've read? Are you hearing us, Rita? Are you hearing Rita? Are you not hearing? Okay. Are you hearing us?
Sorry, I was listening to the rain on the.
Oh, you're getting some rain. Wow.
I'm sorry. Yes, I can hear the rain really thundering down. So it's affected the hearing.
Okay, I was asking if you had, of all the books, Grenadian books that you've read, if you found any that you think could be used in the secondary school curriculum.
Well, of all that I have read, as I said, I think the first one I mentioned, Jacob Ross, Pinter Bender, should really be on the school curriculum. It gives you the history of Grenada, and it takes you back. You mentioned the revolution. what material do we have? It's a young boy growing up in Grenada. It talks about, one of our poets mentioned the rum and the cane fields.
Mm.
And it's so lyrical. It's really beautiful. It makes you proud to be a Grenadian when you read that. It really should be on our curriculum, educational.
Yeah.
Really.
And
I have no hesitation.
yeah.
And Bogus, because again of the cultural impact for the younger readers, and that we know something of our sister island. There's no point saying we're a tri-island state. We want to know something about Korea. And I think you captured the culture. I experienced a little bit of it, say like the cake dancing, that sort of thing, years and years ago, some of the food. And I think, again, that is a way of introducing our younger people to our culture, really.
It's interesting you mentioned you know, the revolutionary period and so on. And a lot of students don't know about the revolutionary period, or, you know, how it came about, how it got dismantled and so on. And they might depend on the internet, you know, look at some articles, follow Google and so on. But those may not be too accurate because they may be written from an outsider's point of view. So again, if we had a library, I'm sure documents would have been in the library to help our students do research about, you know, events that happened in our history, things like that. So, and people who want to write, Grenadians who want to write about that time in our history, or those times in our history, could go to the library and do the appropriate research instead of having to depend on an outsider's point of view about events that happened in Grenada. So it all comes together in terms of why you really need a library. Somebody said, I think Forthright by Cindy Mackenzie would be great in schools. What I like about Forthright is that even the narration is done in Grenadian Creole English. So if there's a listening in the vernacular of our language, then that we could use that as a resource material.
I think also having books written from Grenadians for Grenadians would be good, because language, when it is used and written, becomes standardized. And although many of us speak in a twang, as we say, when it's written, it's not easily read. I've had one of my friends, a teacher, she used one of my poems for her literature class, Form 3 literature class, and they couldn't understand the poem written as they talked. They couldn't understand it, but I was a member of the class. It was over Zoom, and then when I read it for them, they were able to get the gist and understand, and they enjoyed it. Prior to me reading it, they didn't like it, they couldn't make sense. So, but this is how you speak. It's just that we've never seen it written. So I think having books with more of the Grenadian way of speaking is good, not only just to have it, but because we can really solidify our language, because the more of us write it, the more it becomes a solid language.
And I come in on this to say that in the Red Door, I have written the book in what we call Standard English and Grenadian English. And because I know a lot of people might not be familiar with some of our words, I actually did a glossary so that we have words that we use like bobo or bande, you know, or dotish, so that the way we speak, our language is a living language, and we have to give it the respect that it deserves and the acknowledgement. So Red Door takes that into account. Thank you.
Yeah, I think and I think more writers have to write specifically with that in mind, because even in my writing of poetry, I always try to do some poems straight in Grenadian English And in the work that I'm working on now, a novel that I'm working on now, first of a series, the first one is set in Grenada. It's written in the Grenadian English, not necessarily using the same words. Because there are two ways you could do this. You could go straight for how we speak, or you can maintain the regular spelling of standard English, but you use the grammar syntax of the Grenadian English. And that's what I am doing. Of course, that's subject to change based on editing, etc. But I think it's super important that we are focused on that.
Yeah, that speaks to the bilingual nature of our people, eh? And so we need to be able to communicate in standard English at the same time based on context. We shouldn't do horrors if we're able to speak in Grenadian Creole English at whatever level of the dialect, or we shouldn't condemn people for speaking in Grenadian Creole English, even if that's the only dialect of English that they know. If that's what they know, that's what they know. So I think we're getting into the mentality more and more where we accept the non-standard variety of English, Canadian Creole English as a language. And I always applaud that. To me, I think that's great. That speaks to how bilingual we are as a people.
I think also too that it would have been great if we would have had a dictionary of Grenadianisms, because there's some things that just comes from us. And I remember while I was doing the book for the writing Chains That Bind, sorry, I spent a lot of time researching, asking older persons about certain terms that I would hear but not know what it meant. And things like fue, you hear old people say that all the time. You older persons more than younger ones. And you research and you realize, yeah, it's a French word as well, with its, broken French thing. But there are a lot of terms that we have that Grenadians should be proud of. And it's not that we want to correct persons when they speak, oh, you're talking bad. It's us, it's a part of us, right? And we really should celebrate it rather than trying to throw it away, because a lot of the other Caribbean islands, they have their other languages as well. Why can't we?
Oh, to respond to Amy, I went and pulled it off my bookshelf. But Mr.
Thomas.
Chase and his wife, Mr. Chase died, but before he died, Mr. Chase and his wife compiled the abridged handbook of Grenadian Creole, English, and French names.
Yeah.
So it tells the French names in Grenada and their meanings, but it also goes through all of the things you were saying, the words, how they are used, explanations, where they come from. Oh yes, I went and got it as soon as it came out. So it's really, I mean, it's as exhaustive as you could get right now. There are also how subject verb agreement in our language. It gets very grammarly and linguistic at the back for those who are interested in the language and like how you speak it. But it could also function as just like a dictionary. I think, of course, I'm not sure if it has everything in it, but there's the majority in there. So you could get that. Anybody interested? It's called the Abridged Handbook of Grenadian Creole, English, and French Names, a Dictionary of Grenadian Creole English with Grammar and Syntax by Thomas R. Chase in collaboration with Sarah Chase.
And where is it available?
I'm not sure. Mr. Ambrose, do you know?
Yeah, I have to check Zara for that.
Yeah.
I have to check it
I
direct.
need a copy.
Yeah. It's really good.
I use it in my my language and community class course.
Okay.
When that's communication studies 102. Because that's a very valuable resource for Grenadian terms and expression, as well as the grammatical system of the non-standard English or the Grenadian Creole English. So he said they researched that for 10 years before they started putting it together. So that's something I think Grenadians should get. So as soon as he brought them in, I had
They
to run
went
up them.
very quickly.
They went very quickly. I had to get a copy because I thought it was so important. Somebody mentioned that we moved tonight by, the Making of the Grenada Revolution by Joseph Ewart Lane is one that could be included in schools, so the younger generation can have an appreciation of our recent history. So that speaks about, and of course, Ewart Lane was one of the men with the revolution. So you're getting the story from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So it will be a primary source of information right there. So we are now at 7:30. This has been a great session, I think. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties at the beginning. It looks like we had two streams running together, so I had to redirect and just come on directly. But we were still able to have a discussion about reading, and that's something that we could do regularly, probably rotate authors and so on. But since we can't hold big sessions, big in-person sessions, then the internet is the way to go nowadays. So we could use this medium now and then to hold reading recitals, as well as discussions on language or reading or anything that we could write about. So thank you to all the members of the panel, Camille and Amy and Rita. Unfortunately that Nathaniel could not join us, but we had a great time, I think. Hopefully members of the panel enjoyed it as well. Hopefully the audience enjoyed it as well. I learned a few things. And somebody asked where they could obtain Mr. Chase's book. If you look in the telephone book, look for Zara and Thomas Chase, I think is the name in the book, in the telephone directory, and give Zara Chase a call. Thomas Chase passed on a few years ago, but Zara will be able to give you information on that, dictionary of Grenadian words and so on. So thank you, everybody. Any last words from the panel?
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Ambrose. I look forward to more events like this. It's always great to hear persons that I interact with tell me they want to publish. I say go for it. And anybody who's interested in self-publishing, because all of my books are self-published, you can just link me on any social media platform where you can find me, and I will be more than happy to give you some information.
I want to say thank you for the opportunity as well. It's very encouraging. It makes me want to pick up the work in progress that I have and add something to it, because I have not done so in quite a while. But it's very encouraging that people want to read what I have written, and it does help and does go a long way. I don't think people understand how much your appreciation of what we do inspires us and keeps us going. So thank you for your time and attention. And also, Ms. Ambrose, thank you for setting this up.
And I forgot to mention, my apologies, we have to also thank Cassandra Smith. Cassandra had to leave early, but she has been a big part of the process as well. So thank you to Cassandra. Rita, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you. Sorry, the rain was really disturbing me, so it was really difficult to hear. But I just want to say thank you very much. I think it is a splendid initiative, David, and thank you for all the hard work. I enjoyed all the presentations from the various panel. It was lovely meeting everybody. And one day I hope that we will meet in person. And just to say, keep up the good work, and to the audience, thank you for tuning in. Okay. Grenadians could write we, David.
Grenadians could write we. That was our first recital in October of last year. Grenadians could write we. Yeah, man. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, audience. And this video will be back up on YouTube in a few minutes. And so good night and goodbye to everybody. Hasta luego.
Thanks.
Good
Au
night,
revoir.
everyone.
Bye.